your guide to the truth. TheNewAmericanMedia.com.
Broadcasting to you live from the Milky Way Galaxy, the solar system, planet Earth, North America, the United States of America, California, Los Angeles, to be specific. Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Brian Engelman, and you are listening to Agree to Disagree here on the TNAM radio network, where the news always matters. This is the new American media, doing the job that the old American media got paid off. Well, let's just say the old American media is more propaganda than media. But then again, has it ever been all that different? Oh, media today, it's terrible. Remember yellow journalism? I do have a degree, minor in journalism, and, you know, Martin Luther was stirring things up, nailing documents to walls. Thomas Paine was riling people up in the American Revolution. Yellow journalism, William Randolph Hearst. You know, media has always been what media has been, but the new American media, it's you. That's the difference. No matter how much propaganda people are going to have, it doesn't matter if we're able to go on Twitter, we're able to go on Facebook, we have conversations, we hash out the story, and we don't buy the BS anymore. We're done being lied to. And I think that's the big change in politics, especially in 2016. The people are uncontrollable. And I think that's at the core of why so many people are feeling a little unease with government having too much power. Because a government big enough to give you everything you want, and everything you need is big enough to take away everything you have. And that's kind of at the core of what we do here at thenewamericanmedia.com. Seeking truth, challenging dogma, and having fun. We ask that you join our mostly civil conversation. And today we're going to be talking with Muslim activist and radio host Isa Hodge. Isa's been a guest on my program before, and I've been on his radio show as well. A Muslim and Catholic wake up in Merica. A Muslim and a Catholic wake up in Merica. And also I'm going to bring back biblical scholar, author, pastor, Bruce Engelman. Yes, that would be my uncle. My uncle, much like many people I know. You can agree with them on about 70% of what they're saying and the perspectives and the takes that they're coming at. And religion is such a tricky one. He's always been at the cornerstone, if you will, of when I seek these types of conversations out, I like to include him. Because he has a perspective and he's a well-educated man who came up in radio and broadcast as well, covering politics and then sports before turning pastor. And Isa, of course, is a Muslim, former Christian, recently converted, well, actually not recently converted, but former Christian converted to Islam. And this will be a good conversation. I kind of want to get down to the core of the issue with Israel. I want to talk about it. And this is such a complex religious and historical topic that it's going to be good having a little bit of varying opinions on certain aspects of this. Because I'm really just tired of the war. I'm sick of seeing it. I'm sick of paying for it. I'm sick of all of it. I'm really sick of it. Like, what is it going to take for us to have the ceasefire? What's it going to take? So we're going to get Bruce in the show, and we're going to get Isa in the show. And I want to thank everybody who has pushed us over 500,000 views on YouTube. And if you're not there yet, go to youtube.com/thenewamericanmedia. Subscribe to the page, offer your comments, and it's like throwing a couple pennies in the wishing well if you let those advertisements play. It's a way to help us by just donating, 15 seconds or 30 seconds of your time. And who knows, sometimes they put those long ones on there. Let it run. Go grab some coffee. I mean, check out the entire commercial. But we certainly appreciate that. Our homepage is thenewamericanmedia.com, and on the right-hand side of that page, 3 things. TNAM radio button. That's where you click play to listen live to this show. And when we go live, we send out an announcement on Twitter and on Facebook. So those are both linked up on the homepage as well. All right, so let's do this. Let's get everybody into the program. We're going to bring in Pastor Bruce Engelman to get things rolling here.
Brian, how's it going, my friend?
Living the dream, Bruce. How are you?
Living the dream, yes.
Absolutely. All right, well, now we have you in the show. Now, let me see if I can bring Isa into the program here. If we can get all of this coordinated properly. All right, we may have connection. Isa, are you there, sir?
I am.
All right. Okay, so Isa, when I tweeted this show information out, I believe actually I could look it up specifically. Oh yeah, discussing the history and future of Israel with biblical scholar Bruce Engelman and Muslim activist Isa Hodge. You know, you only have 140 characters. I could have said radio host. I could have said a lot of things. How would you self-describe you in 140 characters? What is the best, you know, because I'm like, all right, Muslim activist kind of sounds like, or, you know, okay, it's going to be one of those. That's not what we're doing here, but how would you describe yourself?
A Muslim constitutionalist activist.
All right, yeah.
How about that?
Yeah, I had 7 characters. I couldn't have fit constitution. I think there's 7 syllables in that.
Yeah,
so.
7 syllables in that one, yeah.
All right, well, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that, but even that one's going to grab the attention of people, because they're going to be like, well, isn't that an oxymoron? A Muslim can't like the Constitution.
It's incompatible with Sharia. Hell, I say it all the time. We still argue about what the definition of Sharia is, but it's okay. This show's called.
I don't argue.
Yeah.
You argue.
Okay. I challenge and ask questions, and apparently I don't answer you quickly enough. But it's okay, because the name of our show is called Agree to Disagree, and the point is to have a conversation amongst friends, and I do consider you one. So thank you for joining me on the program, Bruce Engelman. Of course, full disclosure, you are my uncle, and. You have. Why don't you introduce yourself to Isa and the audience? So you've been on the show just like Isa has in the past, but reset it for us if you would, sir.
Yes, well, welcome, Isa.
Oh, thank you, Bruce.
Yes, I've tried to disown my nephew for many years, but it just doesn't work.
Good luck.
But all kidding aside, it's an honor to be on your program, Brian, and I am very proud of you, and I'm looking forward to a lively discussion here.
And as far as your background, Bruce, I did say author, I said pastor, I said a couple of things there, biblical scholar. Set us up with a little bit of your background, and then I'll get to some of Isa's background before we kind of get into the meat of this matter.
Yes, well, I've been in the ministry for 32 years, and as you indicated, I do have a journalistic background. I was a reporter for several television stations. I worked for ABC TV in Youngstown, Ohio, CBS in Columbus, Ohio. I was a reporter for the Pittsburgh Tribune Review. I've been on a radio in Chicago. I worked at a radio station. I was a news anchor in Chicago. So I've been all 3 media, radio, print, and television. And but that was prior to the last 32 years. Last 32 years, I've been on primarily religious radio, Christian radio, and also representing a conservative viewpoint on different talk shows.
Excellent. Now, Isa, over back to your side. Tell us about some of your background, how you got to where you are today, and perhaps specifically some of the spiritual and religious journeys that you've taken to get to where you're at.
Well, in a nutshell, I'm a nurse practitioner. I own a clinic in an urban setting. I have been in the medical field for about 18 years now. Started out as a lowly ENT and worked my way up. Love helping people. Of course, when 9/11 happened, before 9/11 happened, I became Muslim of my own volition. Nobody had a knife to my neck or threatened to kill my family. I became Muslim at the age of 19, almost 20, when I was in college. And I've been a Muslim since then for over 20 years now. So that kind of tells my age a little bit. But just lived my life, got my education, did things like that. And I became politically involved after 9/11 when my minor in college was always history, American history in particular. I saw, this vicious cycle that tends to repeat itself happening again against the religion that I'd studied for so many years. and that I know is not what any of the mainstream media people put out there, nor is it anything that Al Qaeda or ISIS or any of these other people who profess to be a part of my faith say that it is either, or practice that it is. So I became politically involved in a sense, just kind of local here in the area. And it wasn't until I was doing what we call dawah, which is sharing knowledge, kind of doing the same thing right now. It's the Arabic word for kind of sharing knowledge. And I was tired of having to defend my religion. I didn't think, and nobody else, Catholics didn't have to defend them from pedophiles. White Christian men didn't have to defend them from the KKK. Jews didn't have to defend them from the atrocities in Israel by the Zionist government that controls that government there. So why should I, as a Muslim, have to defend my religion based upon idiots? So I made the determination I wasn't going to do that anymore. And this was back in 2013. And an older white gentleman had confronted me and kept trying to have that conversation. And eventually, I guess I kind of lost my cool in a sense. And I said, why don't you show me your Ku Klux Klan card? And he said, excuse me. I said, I want to see your Ku Klux Klan card. And he said, I don't have one. Well, I said, you must. You're a 60-year-old white man that's Christian, so you must be a Klan member. I mean, because you obviously think I'm a terrorist because I happen to be Muslim, so you must be a Klan member. And he said, that's ridiculous. And I said, exactly. It's as ridiculous for me to think that because you're a 60-year-old white man that you're a Klan member as it is for you to think that I know anything about terrorism because I happen to be a Muslim. And so it kind of got me to thinking at that moment that in the medical field, we don't treat symptoms. We treat the root cause that makes the symptoms go away. Yes, there are medicines to help you with symptoms, but we treat the root cause. And this turning that just basically was like a light switch that brought Muslims and Islam to the forefront as public enemy number one was this horrific event that happened in New York and in the East Coast on 9/11.
And you're from New York as well.
Yes, correct. And so basically, that's the root cause of all of this. So I got permission application to hold a rally called the Million American March Against Fear at the National Mall in D.C. With like-minded groups, Christians, 9/11 Truth Movement as well. I had Dr. Cornel West as a speaker, as well as a rabbi, prominent Washington, D.C. rabbi, and some other people. And we had a rally there. And that kind of blew me up, I guess, if you want to call me semi-infamous. I don't think I'm famous, but infamous, because Fox News got a hold of it as well as a lot of other mainstream media, and they said, the Muslims are going to march in their victory march in D.C. on 9/11. And then I have a radio show, basically fast forward after all of that hoopla was done and over with, which, by the way, I will be doing again in 2016, September 11th. I got my own show for the last couple of years called A Muslim and a Catholic Wake Up in Merica with my good friend of many years, Common Cal. And we talk politics and religion, and we use a lot of humor to talk about true things. And I'm actively involved in Muslims for Liberty. I'm one of the chair people there. I'm also on Solutions Institute as well as PANDA, if anybody's familiar with those. PANDA is People Against the National Defensive Authorization, and Solutions Institute is actually an organization built to help activists, and we do that in various different ways, whether it's through media, online, presence, IT help, anything like that to help activists. So.
Yeah, and Solutions Institute is where I met Isa, working with Dan Johnson. You were a speaker on the first ActCon, the online activist convention. Yeah, I was one of the speakers, and I helped Bobby Rodrigo put that thing together.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's kind of where we're at. Is I find myself reaching out to a lot of different people I know, people, my family members, people that, if I have a phone a friend on religious history or some of these things, Bruce, you got to be right at the top of that list. And then it's like people I'm just meeting over at Solutions Institute. It's like, all right, there are complex issues. I want to bring some interesting people together and hash them out. And it's not like we're going to solve the Mideast crisis like every president claims to do during their time in office. It's kind of ridiculous, but we're not going to figure things out completely in a conversation. But I know there's different viewpoints on this stuff, and Israel is something that from as early on as I can remember, it's always trouble in the Middle East. A bus exploded over here. A cafe was struck. A retaliation was mortars were shot over into the neighboring town of, and it's the worst batch of radio in history where you just keep hearing the same song over and over, like getting stuck on "It's a Small World After All," and you hear it 1,000 times. It's something that is hard for me to understand. So, Bruce, let me bounce it over. Issa and I were talking before the show, saying what we need to do is split this up into three different shows. One would be the history of Israel starting with today and the future looking forward. So it would be like Israel and the Middle East in general and looking forward about 25, 50 years. The other would be somewhere around 1947 with the creation of the modern Israel after World War II. And then show number one, which is this one, is probably going to be how far back can we begin the story of the Middle East, whether that's biblically, whether that's supported by archaeological evidence, this, that, or the other, because there's a lot of rival claims to certain territories in this region, and it's been at least part of what's been fueling this for so long. So, Bruce, let me turn it over to you and kind of see if you can set us up as far back as you want to go, and then I'll bring Issa in to kind of add to some of that.
Sure, Brian. And I failed to mention that I've been pastor of a church in Fort Worth, Texas for 10 years as well, along with my religious resume there. Basically, Israel has been a nation for several thousand years. Roughly, the guesstimate is perhaps around 5,500 years when Abraham, who is also considered one of the fathers of Islam, was chosen by God to settle a nation, and God said to him that his offspring and heritage would be as the sands of the beach or the sands of the sea, and he is considered to this day the father of the three major religions: Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. And so we trace Christianity back to our Judeo-Christian roots. I'm going to round it off to about 5,550 years ago.
Okay. Now, that is where you're coming at as far as a starting point. Issa, how far back are you, at least, I don't know, in agreement with that, or where do you, I don't know, does that sound fair, or do you have a different interpretation based on what you've been studying?
Well, I mean, I don't know about the guesstimate of the time frame there. I think I would disagree with some of that, but he is right that Abraham is, peace and blessings of God be upon him, is the father of all of those. I think where Bruce and I are going to disagree is that interpretation of Genesis 12:3. I think that's where he and I are going to differ on that interpretation, because if we actually think about it and we look at which nation was blessed, from that time to this time, it would have to be the one that, if it wasn't for involvement of the United States, well, actually involvement of both England and the United States and the creation of Israel, I think that we would see that actually it's the Muslims. I mean, because they have the lifeblood of the world. I mean, the oil is in all the Islamic lands. And these were Islamic lands long before oil was ever even, discovered. So I think he and I are going to disagree on that, and I think that's where most Christians who can turn a blind eye to the atrocities that Israel has done to both Palestinian Christians and Palestinian Muslims, they base this starting off at Genesis 12:3. So I think that's where we're going to. If he wants to start there, we can most definitely start there. I am, like I said, I am not a religious buff. I mean, I have studied the religions. If you can't see we don't have camera on, but I have a very extensive library of religions behind me that I've studied over 21 years. But I have no degrees in that or anything like that. I was be probably more comfortable if we fast forward through, late 1800s, 1913, 1917, the creation of Zionism, the Balfour Agreement, those kinds of things. But I'll dabble if it pleases my fellow guest or my debater over there. We can.
Yeah, well,
we,
hey, Brian,
we
I
can
do
dabble
have
in the
a
Genesis if you
question
like.
for Isa.
Yeah, go ahead.
Who do you consider Ishmael, who was one of the children, one of the sons of Abraham? Do you consider him one of the fathers of modern Islam?
Ishmael is the father of the Arabs. Isaac is the father of the Jews. And Ishmael was by both religious, both Islamic and Christian theologist scholars. Ishmael was about 13 years old at the time the prophecy to sacrifice his firstborn son. And this is where Christians and Muslims tend to begin to differ in some of our theology. Is that for us as Muslims, we believe that we know that Ishmael was the firstborn. Even Christians know that he was born before Isaac.
Right.
But the prophecy portion is where we differ. And this is where we get the creation of Christians who can turn a blind eye to the atrocities that Israel does, because they believe that it is from the birth of Isaac, the chosen people, even though there are numerous verses in the Bible that show that Israel broke covenant after covenant after covenant after covenant with God, and that Israel as a nation fell out of favor with God. And this is where he and I could, ultimately we're going to have to agree to disagree. We could discuss it to help our listeners understand it, but I don't think that either one of us are going to convince the other one.
Oh yeah,
who that is.
And
you're
far
probably
be it,
right, Isa. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, far be it from me to try to make this about like I'm scoring a boxing match. That's not necessarily the point.
Right.
We're gonna have differing opinions, and that's cool.
Right.
And then that's a good starting place and a place to live in, where we can keep moving along as intricately as we need to, or we can fast forward when we need to. But Bruce, you brought up Ishmael and Isaac. When you asked that question, for what reason were you going down that path? Isa he said where he thought you were going. Is that where you were going, or is it slightly different? Or what?
No, yeah, he picked up on it. He rightfully said that Ishmael was the father of the Arabic nation. Of course, most Christian Bible scholars in the world today consider the beginning of the Arabic world and subsequently the Islamic world with Ishmael, and they will point to the scripture where it says he shall be like a wild man, and his ancestors will be like a wild man, because that he was basically illegitimate. He was the offspring of Hagar, the handmaiden, because Abraham got a little patient with God. And most Christian historians and Bible scholars, as you know, Isa, would say that that's the reason why the Shiites can't get along with the Sunnis, and the Sunnis can't get along with the Palestinians, and so on and so forth. Do you have any? Give any credence to that, Isa?
Well, I mean, the Shiite-Sunni situation there, I mean, it's long past Ishmael. I mean, the Shia-Sunni situation started shortly after the death of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him. That's when that started right there. I mean, that was because they differed, the Khalifa, the ones that were left with the mission of spreading Islam, they differed between who Prophet chose as the Khalifa, the leader of the Muslims, which was Abu Bakr, and there was a small group, as well as Ali, the last living male relative of Muhammad, thought that he should have been. And so there was a split. And it's ironic because the very last message from Muhammad, peace and blessings God be upon him, to everybody was, before he passed away, he said, "Do not be divided amongst yourselves, for you're one ummah." Ummah meaning community. You are Muslim. He didn't say you were Sunni, or you were Shia, or you were Wahhabist, or you were Salafi, or whatever. He said you're one ummah. You're Muslim. Period. Muslim means one who submits to the will of God, one who submits to God. So, but then he dies, and what does man do? The exact opposite of what he said to do. So, but I don't see the connection, to be honest with you, between the Shiite-Sunni issue, which is more tribal than it is who's right and who's wrong, specifically since Sunni is the vast majority, 90 over 90% of the Muslims in the world are the man-made word Sunni, follow that doctrine.
Brian, may I ask a question?
Yeah, it's your floor.
To our guests. I hear on Fox News a lot and other programs and they point back to this verse with Ishmael in the book of Genesis, Isa. They say that all major religions of the world is Buddhism, Taoism, Shintoism, Christianity, Catholicism, Judaism, Confucianism, I say Hinduism, all represent peace, but Islam represents violence and hatred because the word means submission. Is that true? I mean, is that you sometimes feel that is an attack on your faith?
Most definitely it is. And the fact that you're quoting Fox News troubles me, to be quite honest with you. I mean, it's already been proven that 80% of what comes out of Fox News' mouth is lies. And in fact, Fox News just a couple of years ago won a Supreme Court lawsuit giving them permission to lie in their media broadcast. So I don't ever quote. There's a lot of background that's not coming from me, Brian.
Yeah, you know what? That was a glitch on this side, so forgive me,
okay.
Listeners and both of you. I had to kind of reconnect a wire that was going funky there for a second. So sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, so I mean, I don't give any credence to this. I've been dealing with this, for the last 14 years. It's not a violent religion, but it is not a pacifist. Islam is not pacifist. You smack me in the mouth, I'm going to smack you in the mouth. It's equal defense. Islam is about defense, not about attack. Now, that's not to say that there aren't people who claim to be Muslim or nations. I mean, we look at the Third Ottoman Empire, for example. They were a conquering nation. But prior to that, Islam was never spread by the sword. Islam was spread through marriage or through what we call dawah. I used that word earlier, the spreading of knowledge. We look at the largest Muslim population in the world, which is a third of the 1.7 billion, happens to be in Malaysia. Now, it wasn't spread by the sword. It was spread by Arab sailors who would get stuck on the islands down there in Malaysia because of storms, traveling goods back and forth. And because of the heathen, paganistic, naked, nudity, all these kinds of things, women, which are all forbidden for Muslims to partake in, they would build their own villages outside of them. And when the men would come and say, "Here, drink with us, have our women, enjoy these things," and they would say, no, I'm sorry, their interest was piqued at this. At why are you not this way? And then now you look at it, it's one of, it is the largest Muslim population. Southeast Asia is, Malaysia, Indonesia, stuff like that. It is a third of the 1.6 billion Muslims in the world. And the same with North Africa, and we can go all over the world. Even Spain, it was a Muslim country for almost 800 years, and that was not spread by the sword. That was the Jews in Morocco who were being persecuted by the Christians Jews in Spain being persecuted by the Christians who went to the Moroccans, and the Moroccan Muslims came with 250 troops, and they would go from town to town, freeing them from the oppressors, and then gave the towns back to the Jews. When the Jews started to see this, they began to convert on their own because they saw this compassion, they saw this mercy, they saw this selflessness that these Moroccan Muslims were doing. And as time went along, that each town and people were converting, and it became a Muslim state for almost 800 years. Christians and Jews and Muslims lived in peace, and Cordoba was the center of the world at that time. So no, I've studied Islamic history. I've studied Arab history as well. And so, no, I don't give any credence to that. I give credence that all men are violent and that all men can twist their faiths, whether it's the Klan with the Christians, the Zionists with Judaism, or ISIS with Islam. Or, they all can twist it for power and greed. And that's exactly what we have. Christians are not innately violent, and they're not innately racist. They're not innately colonists. They're not innately imperialists. Okay?
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, that's the nicest thing I've heard about me all day.
Yeah. No, seriously, I appreciate your objectivity there, and I also very much appreciate you naming ISIS as a terrorist group. And one of the problems I have with Mr. Obama, our president, is he fails to address Islamic radicalism and Islamic terrorism. And
well, that's because he's a terrorist himself. His entire military campaign in the Middle East is terrorism. His drone program in the Middle East is terrorism as well. So terrorists help terrorists. I mean, let's be honest.
Why are the Muslims letting him get away with those drone attacks? I never did understand that.
What is Pakistan going to do? I mean, look at the sheer number of civilians that he's killed with his drone programs in Pakistan. And mind you, Pakistan is not a country we're at war with. So,
right.
Yeah. So what is Pakistan supposed to do? Pick a fight
Yeah.
with the biggest man on the block?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
What they do is that the politicians there in Pakistan take the money from Uncle Sam, from our government, from our taxes, and say, yes, please, you can go ahead and bomb our civilians all you want. Just keep my pockets fat. No different than Saudi with the Yemen situation going on. No different than the Karzai, government in Afghanistan. And you look all over the Middle East, and it's not just in the Middle East. I mean, it's all over the world. But right now, in the Middle East is the biggest issue. These governments take money and they turn a blind eye. So, I mean, you sit there and say Muslims. I mean, just as powerless as we as Americans are from stopping our government and their overreach of authority, their constitutional violations, the militarizing of the police, just as powerless as we are to do that, they're just as powerless. Muslims are just as powerless to make any real effective change quickly to stop things, particularly when they have forces within and forces without, causing them to disrupt their entire lives, whether it's through bombing campaigns that turns their entire neighborhood, or it's some militant group looking to gain power because of a vacuum that was created in Iraq, creating the likes of ISIS from from al-Nusrat and the Free Syrian Army.
They're just a JV team.
Basically, yeah. Yeah, they're just the ones that when the main contender gets tired, they just tag him and let him in the ring for a little bit to play, and then U.S. steps back in again.
Well, it is really weird that the president called ISIS the JV team, but then you have pictures of John McCain shaking hands with a lot of these people. You see the Bo Bergdahl deal where we bring a traitor back home to release a few people that go back up into high-ranking ISIS leadership positions, and it's like, wait, did the CIA just train them? Who did Russia just bomb in Syria? Were they going after, what group was it? It was the CIA-backed people that they took out. So the creation of ISIS in general is something that gets really complicated. Let's touch on it for a second, and then bounce back a little bit further to history, because if we don't stay focused, we're going to kind of cover all of this and
John
never cover
McCain
anything.
should be put in a home.
They should be incarcerated and they should be fined. I mean, they should be tried for treason. A vast majority of the politicians, both on Republican.
You and I are starting to agree more and more.
But here's the thing I always tell people is that ISIS or groups like, particularly in this situation, they're actually comprised of three types of people. And this isn't conspiracy theories, although some of your listeners may say, oh, he's just a quack, he's just an apologist. But actually, this is verifiable information that you can actually, if you stop listening to mainstream media and actually just paused for a moment and thought of the possibility, because it's not unlike our government to fund a rogue nation or a rogue. I mean, we have done this in South America.
And lied to us about it. And lied to us. Exactly. That was the second point. And lied to us. So this isn't far-fetched, and this is verifiable. But if you look at ISIS as it is right now, it's basically comprised of three groups. Your leadership within ISIL, or ISIS, or IS, or buttheads, whatever you want to call them. They're comprised of CIA operatives, CIA trained militiamen, all right, or merchants. That's what your leadership is. Then your second group, which is your second largest population of that, is opportunistic people that are from Islamic countries, but they're not Muslim. They're bad people. They're criminals, people that were released from prison. They see opportunity there. They can rape, plunder, and pillage their way through Iraq, which has a lot of wealth, and Syria, which had a lot of wealth. This is proven. My wife can actually verify this. My wife is from Tunisia. And there was an influx of prisoners that were released from Tunisia, and they all went over there to Syria. And then they did it, and then they came back to Tunisia wealthy because they went over there and they plundered and they pillaged. And then some of them came back, and now they sit, fat, high on the hog. Not one drop of Muslim or morality within these people at all.
Then you have a small population of them, which is dwindling at this point. If you go back to look at the start of all this back in 2013, which I actually spoke in front of very few members of the House back then, trying to stop them when McCain was at his largest bellowing about getting us involved in Syria. I spoke thanks to Manuel Cleaver sponsored me to speak there. And I said that we as American citizens can no longer afford to fix the world's problems. Even if they're problems that we created ourselves, it's time for us to take care of ourselves. Otherwise, there will be no nation of the United States, because we would be broke, destitute, and spiritually, mentally, and physically incapable of helping not even ourselves. So, I spoke then, but if we go back to then, the media was all, oh, look, we have to support al-Nusra. We have to support the Syrian army. I mean, the Free Syrian Army, because Assad is such a bad guy and he's killing people and he's doing this. So you had Muslims in Europe and Western Europe and America that were like, hey, look, we need to go help our Muslim brothers and sisters. They're being, slaughtered by this dictator. And it's not illegal as an American citizen to go fight with allies to the United States overseas. If you are Jewish and you want to join the IDF, you can do that. If you want to join the French Foreign Legion as an American citizen, you can do that, as long as that country or that that they're an ally. So they were allowed to leave and go fight with al-Nusra and this Free Syrian Army. But like a light switch, what happened? Automatically, it was turned. Oh no! Now they're the enemy. So you had, what was there, like 118 people from England, and there was like 87 Americans, I guess, that they were talking about at that time, that went over there to fight with al-Nusra and all them. But then when they started seeing these guys cutting people's hearts out and eating livers and just doing all these horrific things, they were like, these people aren't Muslim. They're not even human. And then they call home and say, hey, I want to come home. They're like, no, I'm sorry, but you're now an enemy combatant. You come home, you're going to be arrested as a terrorist. So they're left between a rock and a hard place, in a sense. So these are the three things,
That is really weird. That is a really weird component of all of this. That is and I've heard that before, but like trying to put myself in the position of it's very convoluted. Bruce, what do you make of the creation of ISIS as you've been able to see it, at least?
Well, I tend to agree with our other guest. I think as far as its formation is concerned, there are a bunch of renegades that either renegades or misfits out of Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, some from Hamas and Hezbollah, and some of them were sponsored by the CIA. And I think he's right on when he says, if we overthrow Assad, there's going to be, and I'm not a big fan of Assad, there's going to be a power vacuum. We overthrew Saddam Hussein. There's going to be another power vacuum against radicalism.
Gaddafi.
And every time we overthrow one of these dictators, or like with the Mujahideen and the blowback we experienced after Afghanistan, it's like in war, we hated Russia in World War II, but we fought with Stalin to defeat Nazism and fascism, right? Well, sometimes you have to put up with these dictators that you don't really care for. It's like Nixon said about the Shah of Iran. He said, he's a bad man, but he's our bad man. And I'm cleaning up the language for a general audience here. But sometimes I think America is too gung-ho. And it's like Jesse Ventura told me one time. He says, after 9/11, why are we attacking Iraq? And for that matter, Afghanistan, other than going after the bases, all the terrorists are from Saudi Arabia. It's like America always attacks the wrong country here. And you have, as a result of all of this hodgepodge, the so-called JV team. As it turns out, they're not that much of a JV team. They're actually pretty good fighters. And a lot of them have been trained by the CIA. And, of course, my opinion of the CIA, they killed President Kennedy. I'm not a big fan of the Central Intelligence Agency.
Yep.
But the point is, it's a mess over there, and we need some clarity. We need some understanding. How did you feel when Ben Carson said a Muslim should never be president, Isa?
To be honest with you, I think I'm going to have you on my show so that you and I can have this, because you and I are going to have a really good conversation.
Do it. You guys need to. I would listen to that show.
No,
absolutely.
Yeah, I want to invite you to come to my show.
There
and
you go.
I'd be honored. I'd be
being
honored.
a Catholic, and you know what? I'm going to get a good friend of mine that's Jewish, so we'll have a Christian, a Muslim, a Jewish man, and a Catholic all on the same show.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
And we'll have a conversation about this, actually. So we'll have to. I know that I'm anxious to talk about Israel because it is, especially the plight of Palestinians, is a very dear and a dear thing to my heart, and it's also a huge problem. And I think that when we can work together to get an understanding about the state of Israel and our hand in that, I think that's where we can begin to make some changes.
Yeah, and you know what? What I'm thinking is this would be a great time to point out. I'm talking with Bruce Engelman. I'm talking with Isa Hodge. My name's Brian Engelman. That is my uncle, and this is Agree to Disagree. Let's mark this moment of our conversation as I think all three of us seem to be decent people looking for the world to be a pretty decent place. Am I putting words in your mouth, or can we at least start from this point wherever we veer off from here? Is that a good starting place, Bruce?
I think it's a very good starting place. If we cannot sit down and have a dialogue, then what good is our faith? If we cannot, A, defend our own faith, and B, reach out to others with other ideas without compromise. I know, like you said at the outset of this debate or this discussion, he's not going to change my mind on those things, and I'm not going to change his mind. Okay, we get that, okay? But within that framework and that context, there is common ground. And I think that common ground is peace. And we're going to have to live with each other because this nation, the United States of America, is becoming more and more Islamic. And it's the fastest growing religion in the world. And we just can't keep bombing people. I'm a hawk. I am a hawk. I love George S. Patton, who, by the way, fought for your wife's with your wife's fatherland, Tunisia, in World War II against the Nazis. Isa.
That's right.
I'm a hawk. I'm a George S. Patton, Stonewall Jackson hawk. But with that said, war should be the absolute last resort, and it should be with clear definition and clear lines of demarcation, with an exit strategy to help the people in these countries. And we invade their country, and then we abandon them, and we let ISIS come in. But no, I would look forward to a further dialogue with Isa. I think all three of us are fairly even keel type guys. While we are very passionate about our religions and our faith, I think I can tell he knows history too. Isa's no dummy here. I think this will begin a dialogue for the other two parts of your show, and I'd be honored to be on your show anytime, Isa.
Yeah, this is exactly how we need to begin things, and that's why I like the title of your show: "A Muslim and Catholic Wake Up in Merica." It's just you wake up one day, it's like, how far back can we go to dig through history to justify what's happening on October 1st, 2015? What can we do from now to declare some sort of ceasefire, some sort of, all right, nobody has to like it, but you all have to do it. What is it? What will it take for that to happen? But I did want to play this little clip here. We're talking about why did we go into the wrong country. This is General Wesley Clark. I'll let him speak in his own words. It's about 2 minutes. Listen to this, because if you've heard anything more eye-opening about the cluster F that we find ourselves in over in the Middle East, just listen to these words for consideration.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, And by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, are we still going to war with Iraq? And he said, oh, it's worse than that. He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
Yeah. Comments on that?
Well,
Yeah,
I think I have to go here in about 5 minutes, so I'll let Issa have the last word. But I think Wesley Clark pretty much sums it up. We did not have a clear strategy. We do know that Saddam Hussein did have weapons of mass destruction, and he moved them. He was gassing his own people, the Kurds, in the northern part of Iraq. We know he had weapons of mass destruction. But, you know, again, he kept Iran in check, and he was no threat to the United States. He was very little threat to Israel, one of our allies. And, again, it's like Jesse Ventura said. He goes, why are we attacking Iraq? It'd be like us attacking Ireland or Switzerland after Japan bombs Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
18 of the 19. You know, if you are going to go to war, go with the country that attacked you. 18 out of the 19 terrorists were from Saudi Arabia. But see, our government, the CIA, is cozy with Saudi Arabia because we want their oil, and so it's a vicious circle. And you know, I think Wesley Clark brings up a good point there. Issa, I'll let you have the last word on this one.
Well, I vehemently disagree with him, actually. With Bruce here, I'm sorry. I think we found our first thing that we're going to disagree with here.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad there's one thing we disagree about, or it wouldn't be a show.
He's actually giving a window peek to us to let us see that our government, regardless of what they found or regardless of what disinformation they put out there, they had planned on going on a 7-country, 5-year United States rockin' democracy tour in the Middle East. Join us. That's what they had planned on doing.
Rockin' democracy tour. Oh,
okay?
man.
Because if
Rotten,
you don't
maybe.
have democracy and it's not the democracy that we give to you, we're going to bomb the hell out of you until you get the democracy we want you to have. You know, so I vehemently disagree with you in the sense that let's set aside the information you're giving about what Saddam Hussein was doing or wasn't doing. Look where this is coming from. This is coming from the very same people that lied to us, okay, about everything. Even about 9/11, they lied to us. You want to sit there and say it was 19 Saudis, so we should have attacked Saudi? No, I disagree with that because they weren't 19 soldiers sent by Saudi, so therefore the government of Saudi, although, and I want to make this clear, I'm not a fan of Saudi. Saudi is one of the largest humanitarian rights, the Saud family. They represent, they give a horrible image to Muslims. They are, we could go do a whole show on them, okay? I'm eminently against the Saud family and all the royal families of the Middle East. But they only make up 18% of the Muslims anyways. They're a very minute number. But back to point, whether Saddam is right or wrong, who voted in the world to make the United States the dictator of which country who has a bad leader gets to get killed? Because I didn't see us going to Sierra Leone to help them. I didn't see us putting that much work in Rwanda to stop 100,000 people a week getting killed. I don't see us right now going to Myanmar to stop the Buddhists from killing over 50,000 Muslims getting their head chopped off. I don't see us going to Central Africa where you have these Christian factions that are just slaughtering every Muslim in the Central African countries right now. I don't see us going and helping the children in Sierra Leone that have been put into wars. I don't see us going to any of these other countries because they're not beneficial to us. So the whole reason behind the invasion with Iraq is exactly what Wesley Clark is letting us know. And it's exactly the reason why, since 1981, the United States has been actively involved in 30 different Islamic countries, actively causing upheaval. People want to say, well, look at Islam and how violent it is. Look at all of the countries. Well, they weren't prior to the United States in the 1980s meddling in everything, putting this dictator in power and this dictator in power and overthrowing this dictator, all because they want to control the resources. And Saudi it's just the lapdog. Saudi and Abu Dhabi and Qatar and Sharjah and all, they're just lapdogs to the United States. UAE, they just do what they want, because that way they can buy their $80,000 Mercedes-Benz. They can encrust it with $2.5 million diamonds in the paint. They can get their white women in the champagne room. Okay, that's all they care about. These royal families down there. And as long as they can help they can help to control that by causing and paying for a lot of the disruption within the Islamic world. The problems in Sudan have been specifically traced to Saudi's involvement in the weapons and the training of the factions in Sudan. The same in Somalia. That's what's happening in Yemen right now. That's the reason why we have ISIS as well. They're also a big factor in this. So, no, the United States government's involvement, and this brings us back to what our topic of tonight was supposed to be, but I'm going to go ahead and say it out there, is that Israel wants to be the superpower in the Middle East. They use our $4.3 billion a year military aid. This is not R&D aid. This isn't economic aid counting. This is just military aid. $4.3 billion a year to create one of the most advanced militaries, not only in the Middle East, but even in the world, one of the most advanced. They just recently passed us in advanced weaponry. They are part of the UN Nuclear Council. They are, they don't have to announce their nuclears. They don't have to let any UN inspectors inspect their nukes. In fact, nobody knows how many nukes that they have. But they want to be the powerhouse there, just like England wants to be the powerhouse in Europe. And there's a fight between Russia and them. And, of course, we want to be the powerhouse on the Western Hemisphere. So what do we do? They tell us what to do. We tell the Sauds and the other families what to do, and then we have the trauma and everything. All these innocent human beings that are being killed so that they can stay rich.
Go ahead,
That's
Bruce.
That's what makes me sick.
Well, this is where of course we're going to part company a little bit here, because I am a very outspoken proponent for Israel. I'm not saying their governments are always perfect and their leadership is always perfect. But when I was over in Israel 2 years ago, I was shocked, Issa, that 42% of the population of Jerusalem are Arabs and Palestinians. Everybody I ran into practically was an Arab or a Muslim or a Palestinian living peaceably in Jerusalem. So, it's not just Jews. Do you consider yourself an anti-Semite?
No. See, there is a distinct difference between Jews and Zionists. Okay, there is a distinct difference between those two. And the Quran is very specific about it. The Bible is as well. The Bible gives a clear definition. Now, of course, the word Zionist didn't exist until 1917. Well, actually, the first word of Zionist actually came around in 1849, but then Herzog made it a mainstream word in 1917, around the time the Balfour Declaration was created. But no, I am not anti-Semite. I am exactly what the Quran tells me. The Quran says numerous times that both Christians and Jews are people of the book. And in fact, there is this very specific book in the second chapter. It's called Baqarah, the cow. The chapter is called the cow, Baqarah. It says, do not be arrogant because I have chosen to send this message to you in your language. This is God speaking directly to the Arabs. Do not be arrogant because I've chosen to send this message to you in your language. For this message is for all of mankind, and there will be Christians and Jews in heaven, and I am the best of judges. And that's just one very powerful verse that dispels all this mainstream media stuff. And there are many, many, many other verses that validate that statement right there, that Jews and Christians are people of the book. And if God is the judge, and he tells me that there'll be Christians and Jews in heaven, then who am I to determine who isn't, except for by their actions? And we look at Zionists, and we look at their actions. We look at people like Netanyahu. We look at Sharon. We look at these government officials over there. Even the new humanitarian, I'm drawing a blank on her name. You've got these Zionist factions, no different than Nazis, neo-Nazi factions. They're an ideology, and they hide behind the religion of Islam. And this is the distinction that needs to be made. I mean, not Islam, I'm sorry. They hide behind the religion of Judaism. And so this is the distinction that needs to be made. So no, I am not anti-Semitic at all. I mean, I'm married to a Semite. My wife is an Arab.
Wow.
Okay, so
Well,
I
I'm
can't
glad.
be
I'm glad to
anti-Semitic.
hear that. I really am. All right,
So,
I
no.
have to leave. Let's do this again.
Yeah, I'm thinking as we let you go, because I know you do have another prior engagement. I'm thinking where we need to pick up the next show. Let's just kind of start around the Crusades and make sure we have at least a decent explanation of what that was all about, and then move up to through World War II.
As we used to say in the news business, can I give that a tease? With both you and your show, agree to disagree, and perhaps a future show on Issa's talk show.
Absolutely.
And that is, I'm probably going to be harder on the Catholics than I am the Muslims when it comes to the Crusades, because we evangelical Christians and Baptists, we hail from the Anabaptists. We trace our ancestry back to John the Baptist. We do not take any credit or responsibility for the Crusades.
It was more of a Protestant Catholic era.
Right.
Yeah, it was
right.
more Protestant and Catholic.
We Baptists have never mistreated the Muslims. I can't say never, but for the most part, 90% of Baptists and Anabaptists have never mistreated Muslims or Arabs. It's been the old Roman Catholic Church for the most part.
Well, I mean, them and the Protestants, and I mean, here's what I would like to say as far as the teaser is concerned. I think that because we've got way off topic tonight, I really wanted to dive into this. I really wanted to match wits with a scholar.
Well, this is good. Hold on, this is really good though, because this, maybe it's a 4-part show. I don't know, but this is a conversation I would gladly continue, and I think, judging from what both of you said, you'd like to continue it on your show. So maybe this is all an intro. What is it that you want to get into on the next show for your teaser?
Well, I mean, I kind of gave my opinion. I wanted you to talk to Bruce, but I thought we would start with because I kind of figured him being a scholar and Bible and history and things of that nature. I thought he might want to start it, so I've been preparing, just like because I'm not a historian in Bible studies, and I'm not a theologist or a scholar in Bible studies or Islam for that matter at all. So, but I've been cramming for this, to make sure that I understood. So, because I thought I was going to get into a nice little, tit for tat with, with a scholar. So,
well, you did your homework. I am impressed.
Well, thank you. So I thought maybe if we talked about that, because ultimately when you discuss this, I found when I discuss with Christians about the state of Israel, and that I believe there has to be a 2-state solution, that there has to be a state of Palestine and there has to be a state of Israel, and the occupation has to end. Most times, most Christians will always fall back on, well, all of the land belongs to them. So basically, because the Bible said so, and then I go, well, what is the Palestinians supposed to do? And then I say, well, they're not supposed to be there. It's not their land. They took it first. Or, it's just always there's some idiotic response to that. And so you can't talk about this without saying, well, let's look at these verses from the Bible. Let's look at Genesis 12:3. Let's really discuss Genesis 12:3, because that's really the crux of where you're getting all this from.
Right.
But then let's talk about Titus 1:14 or Hosea 6:7, for example, or let's talk about Jeremiah 11:10. That contradict that verse that Genesis 12:3. When we look at this, you have to start there. And even though at the end of it, you're still going to have an agree to disagree, because he's still a Christian and I'm still a Muslim, and I'm not really going at this as a Muslim. I'm just going at this from the Bible and my understanding of studying it. Then from there, let's fast forward to, the Crusades, and we can talk about World War II, and we can talk about the creation of the Israel state, and we could talk about how, Albert Einstein, a Jewish man himself, was offered to be president of Israel, and he declined, basically saying flat out, we as Jews are not supposed to have a land of our own until the second coming. He denied being president. He was adamant about it. And then we could talk about Orthodox Jews and how they are fighting against the state of Israel there as well as here. And we could talk about how can, in the third show or whatever, or the fourth show or whatever, we could talk about how can you defend a regime that is committing these kinds of atrocities. And it doesn't matter whether it's, your 87 that were killed back in June of 2014 on Hamas against the Israeli side, which 3 of them were civilians and the other 84 were soldiers. Or on the Israeli side, how can you defend, over 800 children killed, 2,700 people killed, this X amount of kilometers of land is destroyed now and just nothing but rubble. These things need to be talked about. You need to question these things and say, why are we spending our tax dollars on that? Is this a war, or is this actually genocide? Is this just completely wiping a race of people out simply because we have a different understanding of Genesis 12:3?
Yeah, and
hey Brian, before we go, could I throw a verbal hand grenade in the form of a curveball at both of you?
Sure.
FOI, Friends of Islam, out of Chicago. I want to know why Louis Farrakhan is not in prison for assassinating Malcolm X. Everybody on the street of Chicago and across the Islamic street, as it were, in the United States knows that Farrakhan put the hit out on Malcolm X. Why is he not in prison?
Well, that wasn't a curveball. That was a straight heater to my glove, because I agree with you on that.
Oh,
you agree with me on that?
I like it.
Yeah, and actually it's called Fruit of Islam, not Friends of Islam, by the way. FOI is the Fruit of Islam.
Oh, Fruit of Islam.
Yeah, I've studied the Nation of Islam for a long time, so I'm quite familiar with Louis Farrakhan, Elijah Muhammad and the such.
Maybe Farrakhan is something we can get into in episode 2. Bruce, Isa, I want to thank both of you for joining us on this program. I kind of consider this more of, like I said, an introduction as opposed to episode 1, but it doesn't matter because there's so much to cover here. It's about to get good. I think we've covered a lot of the comfortable stuff, and now we're going to have to start digging in and doing the heavy lifting. And it reminds me of a Ned Flanders quote from The Simpsons. He's having a meltdown, and his life is falling apart, and he's crying out in his moment to God. He says, I've done everything the Bible says, even the stuff that contradicts the other stuff. And it's a very hilarious line, that he's doing everything you want me to do, even the things that contradict the things you told me to do. And religion is one of those topics that we could literally talk forever, as long as we try to keep it mostly civil, as we seek truth, challenge dogma, and have a little bit of fun. So Isa, Hodge, thank you so much for joining.
Thank
you. And Bruce, thank you so much for joining. We're going to do this
You're
again
welcome,
real
Brian.
soon.
Thank you, Isa. Thank you, Brian.
And
thank you.
And everybody out there, I appreciate you listening. If you haven't subscribed, youtube.com/The New American Media, please do that. Check out the videos, watch the commercials. Commercials are kind of like donating to the New American Media. It's super neat. On Twitter, we're at American_media_. On Facebook, do a search for The New American Media and like the page. You can also find that on our homepage of thenewamericanmedia.com on the right-hand side. So, from everybody out here at the TNAM Radio Network, I appreciate you. And I love you. Talk to you later. Peace.
Hi, everybody. You're listening to Agree to Disagree with Brian Engelman, and this is John B. Wells reminding you that not only is Brian Engelman a cool guy, and not only is the newamericanmedia.com a very cool platform, but here's a cool idea for you, too. Are you alone? Not really. Do you like dogs? Do you like cats? You do. Of course you do. Everybody does. One or the other, maybe even both. You know, there are a lot of dogs and cats that are at shelters right now, and if somebody doesn't take them home, they're going to wind up euthanized. That's a nice way of saying they're going to be killed, because there's simply not enough room. I guarantee it, the best dogs and the best cats, the best pets, come from shelters. There's something about dogs and cats. They know. They know where they are. You walk through one of them, and certainly at least one is going to look at you and go, I wish you'd take me home. I'm in hell. Please take me out of here. It'll be the best thing that you ever did for your soul. You'll feel good about it. And not only that, but you have a friend for life. Doesn't matter if you got money, you don't have money. Well, it doesn't make any difference to a dog or cat. All they need is the sound of your voice and maybe even the stroke of your hand, and they're fine. Maybe a little food every once in a while. The sweetest sound that those pets ever hear is your voice. Think it over and adopt a cat or a dog from a local shelter today. I'm telling you, you'll be glad you did.